Okay, so basically you've now debunked the whole evil board myth here, which, I mean, really now I'm going to have to go and get therapy to like just get over that. I think one of the things, and I mean, I am playing devil's advocate with you today, but I think one of the things as an employee, the board is very often this cloud. We know we've got a board. We sometimes see their photos on something, but we don't connect it to them. And, you know, I quite follow Simon Sinek, and he always says a company should have no more than 100 people because then they all know each other. You can still know the names and have a general idea of the face of 100 people. More than that, people lose connection, and they can sort of like start hurting each other and taking each other for granted or just avoiding each other. You know, and it sort of, you lose the connection. So I think we sometimes forget that the people on the board, alarmingly, are people as well. And maybe if we met that person in a coffee shop and didn't know who they were, we'd relate to them differently. What do you think about that?
I think that's interesting. I think the fact that someone is a director elevates them in the eyes of a lot of people. And I think you've got to reframe your understanding of the role of a director. A director doesn't have authority by the fact that they're a director. A director has a massive liability. And I think sometimes we look at these directors and we go, you know, they're earning big bucks, or some are. But we also forget that that's where the liability lies. You know, when businesses go bust and directors haven't done their job, they are liable personally for their performance. And there are many cases around the world that demonstrate that. And I think sometimes we like to think about the cushy job of being a director, but we don't think about the responsibility and authority and liability that comes with it. So directorship is a position that needs filling and has a job to do. And that's why the directors are sitting there. Not because they're some form of special human being. So yeah, relating to the individuals, I think, would be valuable and understanding who they are. That said, it's not the role of a director to know everyone in a business if there's 3,000 people.
No. So if we carry on with this whole concept of, you know, directors, connection, loss of connection, that kind of thing, what are the 3 things that you think keep directors up at night that would put a totally different perspective on how they're seen by employees? I'm so glad we prepared for this.
So frankly, let's start with, where is your paycheck coming from tomorrow? I think a lot of employees, and if I sort of jump on the side of the directors here, because you're being the devil's advocate on the other side, is I think there are a lot of employees that do get an entitlement around, you know, I'm entitled to this. And yes, you're contracted to do something. But I think people forget that someone has to make sure that happens. You know, your point earlier, a company is a group made up of people. And part of the people that make up a company are the directors. And it's the director's job, particularly in a small business. You know, if your director is the founder, is the entrepreneur, and that's the only person there, and you look at their car and you go, oh, look at them, they're spending all the money on that car. You probably choose not to think about what happens the night before payroll when all of a sudden your business has lost a big contract, or COVID's hit, or and there's an impact. So I think one of them is, you know, directors are thinking about that. I think the second thing that keeps me up at night as a director is, where is this business going? And when I say this business, I mean any business that I'm involved in as a director, because I have a responsibility, a stewardship, a guardianship of that business to make sure it's there for a lifetime, that there's a cycle, that there's a journey. And what's providing the opportunity today to employ people, to provide sponsorships into the community, to pay our suppliers and provide them opportunity to supply, all of those things might not be there tomorrow. And I think many directors, particularly in the world of COVID, the world of technology, the world of what's coming next, the world of changing environmental expectations, none of which I'm saying are inappropriate. And I don't want someone to send me a message and say, Carl, you negatively commented on environmental expectations. I think business should be doing a lot more to achieve the shift. But I think governments in that context, and I suppose this is the meandering now with our coffee, could work better with business to create more long-term sustainable outcomes on both the social and the business front, to achieve, social and environmental front with business to achieve some of those objectives. But the point I'm making is the second thing that keeps me awake is thinking about that longevity. The third thing I think that keeps me up particularly at night is often trying to bring the businesses I'm involved in back to their core purpose. I'm a big believer, to your point, in Simon Sinek and the why. What is your why? What I like to call your promise. I think often we don't appreciate the fact that money exchange is simply the exchange of promises. If you go back to the old days of a check is a promissory note. It's a promise to pay the bearer. And I think we just need to remember that business is about the exchange of promises. And a promise is not about how much money you're going to make. The money is a measure of success, and you need money to make business flow, and you have to pay shareholders. People shouldn't get upset about shareholders getting a reasonable return because they have provided the capital. They have put the capital in to enable the business to get going. And there's a reasonable level of return. I get that. But it's all about why does this business exist? Why is the world a better place? Because this business is here. And I like to bring the businesses I'm involved in back to that. And sometimes that keeps me up because in different boardrooms, I have different personalities and directors I have to navigate around that blend of, are we here to make money and give money to our shareholders? Or are we here to achieve a balance for those sort of purposes?
What you describe, so thank you for sharing that. Those are very interesting. So, I now want to ask you so many questions off of that. The first thing is, I want to summarize from an employee perspective, seeing as how we're taking science here today. So
just remember, I'm the Kiwi, so that means I do always win.
I could actually just phone your wife and tell her to thud you on the head.
She probably would, to be fair. She probably would.
In South Africa, we can discuss politics and religion, but rugby, no, we don't go there. Our ruggers is holy.
I get that.
So normally because we do lose. So I want to give back to you what I heard from the three things that keep you up at night. From my perspective, it's, as an employee, my salary, because you are worried about me and my family and being able to keep head above board. You worry about sustainability so that I can stay in this business, even if I move in my roles. You want to make sure that there's a place that I know that is home, away from home to me, where I can work, grow, develop over a period of time. And then to your third point, and I absolutely love this because I feel like this says to me, Sirdar builds businesses for the future, is that you worried about the business's why, because my why has to connect to that, or else I'm just earning money. So I've got a place that's going to pay me money for an extended period of time, as long as I perform appropriately, in a way that I can align with its purpose and believe in what I do, and that actually my contribution is great because of it.
Absolutely. The one clarify or the one T's and C's I'm going to put on that is I also don't want anyone to come back to this and say, I've been involved in a business where you've done a restructure, Carl, and I lost my job. Yes, that has happened. But sometimes directors and boards have to make decisions in order to ensure the business is sustainable. And sometimes that does mean people lose their jobs. Sometimes it does mean there's a restructure. Sometimes that does mean someone's fired for non-performance. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that, because that is part of what business is about. I think the key is, as a director, can I put my hand on my heart and say, 9 times out of 10, I get the balance right? And I think that I do.
This sounds a bit like my diet. So I'm sharing. I'm being vulnerable here. Give me a second.
I absolutely get it. Love it.
So I have a diet. I've been on it since 2017. It's actually not really a diet. It's more like a lifestyle thing. And I calorie count and I exercise. I live healthily. I take time for my mindfulness. So maybe it's more lifestyle than really my diet. And then every once in a while, then something stupid happens, like I get a call 3 o'clock in the morning that I've got a father who's elderly that I must take to the hospital or something. And then I'm at the hospital, then I'm drinking coffee and it's got milk and sugar in it, but actually it's the only way I'm going to get through the next 3 hours. But then when the next morning comes and I've taken care of him and he's as safe as he can be, despite the fact that he's 82 and he has dementia, so it's massively traumatic when something happens to him. Tomorrow morning I start again, and I'm still on that good path. And I try and keep that good path. And then all of a sudden it's Christmas. And then I fall off again. But as you say, 9 times out of 10, I'm living with that mission of getting it right.
Yeah. I think that's a good way of framing it. I think sometimes we get hit by things like COVID, and that forces a business to make tough decisions. Different businesses approached it differently. We were lucky and blessed in that we're part of a business that was able to guide through COVID relatively successfully, I think, compared to other businesses in our sort of space. But I think at the core, if you understand why the business exists and you've got that promise or that purpose, then you make those decisions in good conscience.
I love that. I love that. So I have one last question for you. How do I know as an employee that my voice is heard at board level? What are the mechanisms in business that are supposed to be driving? So I know Innocent is not going to, well, Innocent's likely to do it. But anyway, Jane is not going to, launch a protest around the quality of food in the cafeteria, and it's going to be heard at board level. You guys take a look at you take a much bigger, broader approach. But what are the mechanisms? Who in the business is supposed to be representing me at the board as an employee?
So I think there's an interesting question there about whether or not you should have a representative. And I think there's an interesting question about the context of representatives around the board. So often people will talk about the shareholder representatives around the board table, but there's no such thing. The law doesn't allow, if we talk South Africa as an example, the law doesn't allow for there to be a shareholder representative. The moment a director sits around a board table and says, I represent the shareholder, they're actually out of line with the Companies Act. And it's just not the law. The law is, as a director of a company, you have to act in the best interests of the business. And that's it, full stop. Now, sometimes what's in the best interest of the business is aligned with the shareholders. Sometimes it's aligned with the employees. Hopefully, most of the time, it's aligned with both. So it's not an environment where you get the opportunity to, just say, well, who's my representative and I want to be on the board. I think different businesses will have different levels of engagement in terms of who they or how you connect with the board. In some businesses, it's going to be some form of whistleblowing mechanism. In large businesses, there might be some form of employee engagement surveys that float up. If it's issues like harassment type things or racism or things that are very clearly no-go areas for individuals, i.e. I'm not allowed and shouldn't and am not any of those things. In a boardroom or in a business, if those things occur, they need to be informed of what's happening. And so somehow you've got to find the appropriate way of getting those things onto the board table, whether that's through HR, whether it's in a smaller business directly with calling one of the directors. But I think you've got to be careful to think that as an employee, if there is an issue and you don't like the response your management team is providing you, you can go to the board and they will overrule, because boards are not there to manage the business.
Now that's an interesting thing. So maybe I asked, well, yeah, I have another question. I won't say I've asked the wrong question, but who or how does the board make decisions that could have impact? And I'm not talking about firing or retrenchment. I'm talking about day to day. I'm working at this company, and there's a general issue that sort of is simmering. Do boards even know about that, or are they taking a look at the numbers and going, this is what we decide because of the numbers?
So the answer is in talking about a specific board. So different boards will deal with this differently. A board that purely looks at the numbers, in my view, is not a high performance board. My approach to being a director, and certainly the way I train directorship, and at Sirdar we train people to be directors, is if you're a director, for example, of a retail business, when was the last time you went into one of the stores? Even if it's a store you would never buy from. I chaired the board of a retail business that recently was sold to Mr. Price for a number of years. And I would regularly go into some of the little towns in the middle of nowhere and go into the store. Now, it's not a store that I would normally go into or buy from. I'm not the market or the demographic for those stores. But we would go in. Funnily enough, I normally bought something actually, and it would be for someone or for myself.
Yeah.
However, by going in, I would get a feel for where we were at. I would talk to the employees. Sometimes, to your earlier question, employees would recognize me from a previous engagement or a company function and know who I was because I was a director and it's a decent number of staff.
Yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily know who they were because I might not have met them or not met them one-on-one. But I think it's really important to take your question and contextualize it to the specific board. And I think there are many boards that are completely disconnected from the organization that they're trying to govern.
And I think that's maybe the root of the stereotype that I was speaking of earlier, is that, there's that total disconnection. Carl, I could keep you here for another hour, but I believe that you have a hard stop, and so do I. Yeah. I wanted to say thanks so much. It has been such a blast. I'm so sorry we only had half of our conversation, but that does mean that I'm going to find time in that busy schedule of yours for another discussion so we can speak about Contribution Compass.
Really look forward. And thank you for having me, and thanks for sharing a coffee.
Only a pleasure. I hope you have a good one. So everyone, what a lovely discussion. Honestly, Carl and I only had about half the discussion we were supposed to have. So it's lovely. We're going to have him back in a couple of weeks. I think such an important conversation we actually had about boards. And I wonder if there's not a space for us to start a conversation around what other questions people would want to hear or want to ask of Carl about being on a board. And really, what that means for us as employees in businesses. But that's all for this week. And as always, if you liked what you saw on YouTube, please will you like and subscribe. Also remember to click on the notification bell, because that will let you know whenever we're posting a new video. And then, of course, if you found us on LinkedIn or on Facebook, lovely to find you there. Please like, comment, share, and then go to YouTube and subscribe. But until next time, I look forward to seeing you at the Performance Cafe.